President Biden is now refusing to answer questions about those classified documents found in at least 4 locations.
And as the Justice Department investigation continues, the White House says there may be some information they just can't reveal right now. Some Republican members of Congress are promising to find out who had access to Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home where some of the documents were found. The president's supporters call this hypocrisy, pointing to former President Trump's handling of classified documents. But there's also the question of timing.
Many of the answers from here may need to wait until the conclusion of the special counsel's review.
The president has said he would cooperate with the investigation, but the White House would not say whether he would be willing to be interviewed as part of that process.
And this investigation just now getting started. So let's turn to Tia Ewing in Studio 32 with a closer look into this. Tia?
Absolutely, Anthony and Natalie. Here to talk more about this is political science professor Suzanne Chott with North Central College. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
One thing we can't ignore are the comparisons that are being thrown around here between President Donald Trump and now the sitting President Biden, these documents being found at their homes. I know there's a difference here. Can you talk about what are the differences between the two?
Yeah, it's really important to make these distinctions, especially when there's cries of hypocrisy, because it's happening. It is now happening to who was now Vice President Biden at the time. The most important difference, I would say, is the volume of documents, right? So we have hundreds of documents that were recovered at the Mar-a-Lago estate, and a lot, in terms of the 300 that they found, hundreds they found, a lot more of the proportion of them were deemed classified and top secret compared to the handful that had been found at the locations that were noted previously. So the volume is important. The other thing I think that's important is that one of the things we look at whether or not a law was broken is that was it a purposeful mishandling, and was there some willful nature of having the documents to show them to others. And so that's another difference here, is that it seems as though from the information we have so far that what was found from Vice President Biden at the time's documents was not willfully or knowingly taken, and that was not willfully or knowingly shown to others. Those are the two biggest distinctions.
Okay, so we know Trump didn't directly answer questions about the classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. Can Biden continue to refuse to answer as to why these documents were found in his home?
I think this is incredibly tricky for the current president, specifically because he had such strong language when the Mar-a-Lago raid happened and the documents were found at former President Trump's home. And so I understand right now that there's an ongoing investigation. The special counsel's doing its job. We want to sort of stay out of it. And I respect the staying out of it. But to dodge questions and make no comment makes it seem as though there's something he's hiding, even if he is not. And so even a small statement that the president could make, I think, would go a long way right now to show some amount of transparency and acknowledgement.
Do you think that Biden's document drama could actually play out in the public?
You know, right now, it's interesting that it's playing out a lot in D.C., right? Republicans, who are now in the majority of the House, are making a big deal about this with their oversight. They want to get involved and investigate right away. In the public, while people are concerned and they think that there was a mishandling, what I think is interesting is that this is now the second president in a row, well, he was vice president at the time, where we've seen a mishandling of documents. And so is this the norm? Is this what we should expect? I think there's confusion. So what it seems to be right now is it's playing out more in D.C. than it is actually in the public.
Very good points there. All right, Professor Suzanne Chott, I'm sure we'll be talking to you about this some more in the future. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you as well, Tia. Have a good day.